Okay, so today I'm joined by Talya, who is the founder of Down to a T, which is competitive positioning that helps B2B companies stand out. Before that, it looks like you spent several years as a PMM up until your last role as a director of product marketing at a software company. So deep experience in product marketing. So I'm excited to talk with you today about competitive intelligence and positioning, because to me, and I think to everyone, these are just hugely important topics today, considering how busy things are getting. So excited for our convo. Is there anything you'd like to add to that intro and maybe just add a bit of context?
Thanks for having me, first of all. I think, before doing PMM, I kind of discovered that I don't know, like 8 years ago. But before then, I'm actually coming from product, which I have to say has been especially helpful for being a PMM, working cross functionally with product managers. And collaborating with them. Before then, I was a PMO. So my career journey did not start in marketing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about PMM because that's kind of like where I really like that space. I kind of see a lot of the like cross functional roles. I think this is one of the better ones.
Good stuff. Yeah, yeah. I'm interested to talk about like competitive positioning, I think you call it, and competitive intelligence. Because for me personally, this is so my the extent of which I've always viewed competitive intelligence is, I come across a post on social media or something, there's like a product launch going on, or there's like an upcoming webinar, and I go, oh, that's interesting, and I take a look. Or, I have gone down into the weeds. So I do I've historically I've done a lot of paid marketing, and so I go to the ads libraries and I can sort of reverse engineer stuff. So, but I've never really, my background is mostly working in startups where everything's scrappy. There aren't many processes for things, and so I'm interested to hear from a perspective of maybe where things are more organized and there's an actual method behind the madness. So I guess first thing I'd like to talk about really is from your perspective, what is competitive positioning?
Yeah. So it's a great question, I think. So I have a love-hate relationship with competitive research. I've always had that because even I remember when I started as a PMM, whenever someone was talking about the need to do that competitive research or like what our competitors are doing, I never liked that obsession with competitors. I'm like, who cares what they're doing? I mean, we care, but also let's figure out what we want to do, right? Um, and also, I kind of felt, I think more earlier in my career, that it's kind of seen as a very tactical job. So we just need someone to go in and do some competitive research, and they don't even have to be clever, right? We can find an intern, someone who's still in college, and we can just have them do that. Um, but then I think that as the years went by and I got deeper and deeper and deeper into PMM, I just found that naturally that's something that's part of my job, right? That's just something I can't figure some stuff out before I figure out what's happening in the market and what other people are doing and how other people are talking about what they're doing and how audiences are responding to that. So, and I think that part, that was really something that clicked for me, just in terms of there's just a huge gap between I think what people think competitive research is for and how it should be done, and that it's basically kind of I think a lot of people when they say that they think, oh, it's like a feature comparison table, right? Do they have that feature that we have or no? It's like a yes or a no thing. Um, but really, I think it goes way deeper than that. Um, and and it's not like rocket science. If you look at any positioning framework out there, they always there's always mention for that market and alternatives. So it's part of that, but I think it is something that a lot of companies just kind of breeze through and don't really spend a lot of time on. I think competitive, like sadly, again, like is seen more tactical. It's like, let's figure out what they have, what they're doing, whip up some battle cards, give it to our sales team, and like that's it. But really, and it's kind of like a missed opportunity. And also, like I have to say, like even as a product manager, it's really important also, right? So like it's not like again, like my relationship with competitive kind of started way before I was even in product marketing, because it's also part of like the product job to know what happens and like what other alternatives exist, and decide, is that something that I want to adapt to? Is that something that I think is important to my audience? Is that something that my users care about? And what's my approach to solving that? So again, I think it's one of those things who go way beyond like just marketing, and it just goes really, really deep. But somehow they don't get that reputation. It just seen as super tactical.
Okay, so my interpretation of what you're saying is that, so because I'm probably guilty of this, right? Most people view competitive intel as like, you know, competitor A has these features, like this is how we should position against them, or they're doing this, maybe we should do that. But you're saying, and it completely makes sense, that really competitive intel is like a critical data point in the entire business, i.e., I guess it's a conversation you need to have when you're building the product vision, like where are we going to be in the next 1, 2, 3 years, like it's a critical data point there. And then of course marketing and sales, like how do we when a competitor comes up, how do we position ourselves? Okay, yeah, I'm totally on board with that. When, from your experience, when does, because I feel like most things are paid lip service in particularly early stage startups, because there's just so much going on, you can't really do anything, any one area, like you can't really excel in it. When, from your experience, do you see that companies start to take competitive intelligence more seriously, maybe bringing in that first dedicated hire, or just when do they when does it start to become a more frequent conversation, let's say?
I think it's less a matter of a stage that they're in. I think it's more of a maturity thing.
Okay.
And companies can be mature, like within like a year or two, right? Like, and some companies, like, I've worked at companies that were around for like 10 years, and I was their first founding product marketer. So, and like they definitely didn't have like a dedicated competitive intel person. So I don't think it's like a are you like a serious like seed ABC, or I think it's just like how um people who are leading the company kind of like think about these things. I'll give you an example, right? Like I'm working now with a company, and their head of marketing, they've been around larger companies. Specifically, this is a smaller company. They have not been around forever, but they get that, competitive is a crucial part of the marketing strategy. So it's a topic, or like it's an area that they wanted to invest in. But again, like not everyone will do that, right? Like I mean, I can't tell you how many times I had like discovery calls with like CEOs and founders who say, there's no other product in the market that does what we do, and all of that, we don't have competitors. Which is, like, I mean, and I get that maybe they think that their product is unique in some ways, but that idea that there is no other way to do what they're doing is probably absolutely false, right? Like there's always a way to do that. So the question is just how. um like there's always an alternative. And again, and I think it's also that, um just like coming to term with that, and also with the fact that, and I think specifically for competitive positioning, not necessarily for competitive research, but just like It doesn't matter if you're working at a super saturated category or if it's like a newer one. I think, again, like just acknowledging that every human being, when they look at something, when they hear about something, they compare it to something that they know.
Mm,
It's like they have like this mental map, and even if your product is so, new and unique and there's nothing else like that, they're still going to compare it to something else that they know. um, and again, and I think it's just that internalization and understanding that this is something that's happening, so we better get ahead of that, and we better control the narrative, and we can better we can better explain to those potential buyers, here's where you want to put us in your mental map. It's kind of like it's more important than just saying we're the only one who's doing it, so it doesn't matter what they think. It's almost like putting the ego aside,
mm,
and just acknowledging the simple truth, that there's always an alternative way to doing what you are offering.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and it resonates a lot with me because I work with a lot of founders, and we're all guilty of this, that we think our thing is the only thing, and it's then nobody has ever created it before. So you isolated two things there. You said competitive research and then competitive positioning. So is my understanding is competitive research is the inputs, and competitive positioning would be like the outputs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to because I want to understand like the details about them. So from a competitive research perspective, what does that look like for you? Like, what are the sort of methods and tools? Like, because to preface this, for me, it's always just been screenshots and some spreadsheets, right? Like competitor A, like here's what they're talking about, who's they're targeting. I haven't really used any special tools or techniques. I'm interested to hear from your perspective. Maybe that is the way, but yeah, interested to hear.
Yeah. I think, like, generally speaking, I think the tool matters less than the essence of what you're doing, right? Like, if you want to use Google Sheet, that's totally fine. I often like start with that. Um, and yeah, the screenshots, like, I was laughing because it's very, I mean, I think every product manager can tell you that their phone is full of screenshots of like every step of onboarding for like competitors products and stuff like that, because like that's what you do. And you take screenshots of everything, and then like you analyze it, and then and like that's part of the job. That's awesome. That's great. For I think, like, for me now, like in recent years, that I'm more focused on marketing strategy. Um, Again, it's less about like what tool you're using. You can, if you have resources and access to like a platform that just like collects information from the web and give it to you, that's awesome. Some people are really good about like scraping the web and doing that. Some people just like do it manually. I think that part like matters less. It's more about what you're looking at and what you're looking for, right? So um and again, like, I kind of like to shy away from like what features they have. I think that's less important, because that can also change like
Mm,
next week. um I think where you will get the most value is if you're gonna try to reverse engineer their go-to-market strategy, and that's usually what I like to do. So I'm trying to figure out what audience they're talking to. And you can do that in different ways, right? Like, you can do it just like looking at the website and like looking what case studies and logos they feature, like how they talk about their product, what language they use, right? Like, do they use, and again, like, and that can be like industry or company size or like specific people in a company, right? Like, there can be like many different flavors to that. Um, of course, like in terms of content, like what kind of topics they talk about. I'm sure like SEO people have their own magical ways of figuring out like, like what their strategy there is. Super valuable as well. Um, looking at like review sites, like who's actually reviewing the products sometimes, and that's kind of like my favorite part, right? It's like who they're trying to say they're ICPs versus who their actual ICPs. Um, and I think like that usually will give you a really good way, right? Like if you go to communities and try to find like who's giving, like who's talking about them, even in terms of content, like who they're working with, who they're collaborating with. Um, Again, like you will get a sense of the type of people or companies that they're trying to go after, um, more than probably what their hero website is gonna tell you. um and then another thing, of course, is like how, like what language do they use, how they talk about it. Again, like more to kind of like what benefits or what capabilities they're trying to highlight, like what pains are they talking about, so you can kind of reverse engineer, I think, their go to market strategy from that. And I think, to me, like kind of like the first piece that really takes that, as you said before, right, like the more like input competitive research to the output competitive positioning. I think the first thing that connects these two is, first of all, figure out which of your competitors are actually competing for the same ICP as you,
Mm.
because it may not be, it usually isn't, I will say it like that, it usually isn't like, who you think when you're starting that exercise your top competitors are. It's usually a different list at the end.
Yeah, useful. I was doing some competitive research maybe like a few months ago now, and um, I distinguished between direct competitors and indirect competitors. So I view direct competitors as similar products going after the same similar people, and then indirect competitors where maybe just one of those variables is different. So it might be a similar product going after a different market, or they might be going after a similar market but have a different product. And I think you can get insights from both of those, i.e., even if it's a completely different product but they're targeting the same people, well, fundamentally the fears, the desires, the hopes of those people, because I always look at things from like a messaging perspective, is going to be similar. And so if they've got a couple of years in the market, there are definitely insights you can learn there. And of course, then if it's a similar product going after a different market, then there are sort of product marketing things you can learn there. While you were speaking, because when I hear competitive intelligence, like my background's military, so I automatically think of like counterintelligence. Is that just not worth the time for like SaaS companies, like maybe trying to deceive certain competitors, or have you seen anything like that where they sort of throw like a fakie to try distract competitors, or just not worth the investment?
First of all, same background, yeah, Intel. So it's funny that you say that, but I think it's rare. I think it's really rare in tech, because, I mean, especially now, especially in recent years, right? Like I think teams are getting smaller, goals are getting loftier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reality is that like most teams are just kind of trying to, win and like survive. Um, but yeah, I think this is definitely less frequent, um, than where maybe like like your mind and my mind are going to.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there. I mean, I wish everyone were thriving so much that they actually had time to like do all these like super cool like decoy, like very like James Bond exercises. But I don't think that's super common.
Yeah, I didn't think it would. It's just where my mind was going to, because I meant, it's also, yeah, in like tech, how far does it get you? Maybe gives you a few months of an advantage, and then they've already caught up. So that's like the competitive research side, the inputs. What about the outputs then? Competitive positioning, like how does, or how do you, or how do these companies turn those, maybe those that information they've discovered, and actually um, apply it in a way that's going to benefit them in the market?
Yeah. So I think, again, I think once you figure out, and you touched on that earlier, which is very on point, right? Like direct versus indirect competitors. And you kind of really decide and you prioritize like who you're going to go after and like what effort, right? Like you're going to put against going that. I think once you figure out that and you kind of know, or hopefully you got a good understanding of like what their go-to-market strategies and like where they're heading, where they're going. And sometimes it's amazing, like that simple exercise, you can spot changes that they're working on like a year before they happen. Like
Mm.
it really does work. But I think then you have enough meat to go and have conversations with product team, right? And you can compare notes, um, tell them where you think things are going. You can bring it to more like strategic conversations with the exec team, right? Like these are competitors now, but I think like maybe in a year, we'll see a different landscape. I think that, maybe they're shifting gears, they're going up market, down market, like, things like that. And then, of course, like you kind of can't talk about competitive, I think, without talking about sales enablement. And I'll even say like marketing enablement, right? Because competitive research or competitive positioning should really go through, like it should impact messaging and it should impact um, like talk tracks and a bunch of other things. Just like it should go beyond, okay, great, we have some info, let's whip up some battle cards. Um, and I think some of the more useful things, and even like more tactical, like type of like this is going to help the team tomorrow. Outputs that you can have from that exercise is by knowing who you're actually competing with, or like who your audience is actually considering and what they're, and like, like knowing their mental map, and by kind of stacking it up against your distinct capabilities. And again, they can be product or non-product related. Doesn't matter. The only thing that's important there is that there are things that your, again, like your target audience, your ICP really cares about. And hopefully your competitive research lets you know which of your competitors offer these things and which don't. And they don't have to offer all of these things or none of these things, right? Like maybe you have 4 distinct capabilities and you have, status quo allows them to do 2 of those, um, but not, some other ones. When you are trying to talk to a prospect, or to the market, right? Like even like in your messaging or ads about why they should even move or consider a change, just a change doesn't even have to be yours. You know what capabilities you should be talking about. You should be talking about the things that they care about that they cannot achieve with the status quo. So it just kind of gives you a really nice mental map of this is how we can win against each of these other alternatives. And I think before going down like super detailed SWOT analysis of each one of them and doing like a really super detailed battle card and giving it to sales, just like tell them, hey, when this competitor is in the picture, this is what you should be talking about. When that competitor is in the picture, like this is what you should be talking about. And keep it like super simple. It's going to help your sellers. It's going to help you develop more material for them, like quick dismisses, things like that. It's going to help your marketing team figure out what competitive campaigns they should like think about, what messaging they want to put in there. Like if you're even like maybe gonna do change like your messaging, your homepage on your website, again, like just like knowing what capabilities and what benefits you want to highlight, that's gonna really resonate and really gonna differentiate you against all these alternatives. Because at the end of the day, that's the point, right? Like how can we help the buyers just understand how we're different than these other 12 options that they have. And then if they're the right audience, then the way that we differentiate ourselves is supposed to resonate. and it's going to make everything else so much easier in the process. But that's kind of like the first thing that we have to figure out.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it all sounds valuable, and I like it. Keeping it simple. Simple means it will get done. At what frequency do you repeat this? Because I just feel like, especially when markets are competitive, it sort of lights a fire up everyone, and everyone wants to ship faster, and they just, because I think they're operating from a place of fear that other competitors are going to take their market share. And so I just feel like things are just changing so fast. New features every single month, small little pivots or expanding up market. There's just always so many things going on. So, I feel like if you just view this as a one-off project where you've looked at the market, everyone's got their battle cards and everyone's been briefed, but then 4 weeks go by and something new has happened. And so what cadence should companies do this? What cadence?
So two parts, I think. So first of all, internal shifts, right? So if you're about to launch something that is very different than what you've been doing until now, you know, you need to go ahead and do that. If you're noticing changes in your ICP, if your ICP changed because, hopefully you're keeping track of that too, and who buys from you, and you kind of track and you look at that. Um, and if you notice changes there, then that's also probably a good timing to go through that exercise as well. So if any major internal element that happens, you definitely want to go and kind of revisit that, because again, if your ICP changed, then your positioning might need to change. If you're about to launch something like a brand new product, or really change your current offering now, even, but in a way that adds, maybe, I don't know, like it adds use cases, or it adds different options or capabilities that weren't there before, you need to go and do that. But also, I think, to your point, this is definitely something that you want to kind of update just from a market perspective on a regular basis, because things do change. So, and I think that once we make that decision to untie that from, this is going to be a feature function comparison table, then first of all, you can kind of exhale, relax a little bit, and don't think that you have to keep up with any tiny change your competitors make, because that's really gonna derail. If you're only looking at them, you don't have time to focus on what's happening internally. So don't, it's very easy to get distracted. I wouldn't say do it every month, but definitely revisit that, every once in a while, and you can kind of, you know, remember, even if you're working at a startup and you don't have a ton of resources and processes and people who are dedicated to doing competitive intel, you don't have to do this alone. Right? If you have I don't know, a mid-year planning session, that can be, a fun team activity where everyone goes to a different part of a specific competitors that you decide that you want to drill down into, and you can kind of tackle different areas, right? Maybe a couple of people go through the website, a couple of people go through review sites, and some, some in some other areas, and you kind of reconvene and share what you found, and if you need to make updates, you make the updates. So it doesn't have to be insane. It doesn't have to be something that you do all by yourself. I definitely wouldn't say this is a one and done exercise, and once you've done that, that's it, peace out, and you're good to go. But also, don't feel like you have to chase that, because that's just going to set you up to fail. That's impossible. So it can be challenging to find the balance. But I think you will know. Like if you start feeling like, if you start seeing that you're um, used to win deals against a specific competitors like more easily, and now it's getting more difficult, or like you thought you were going to win them and you keep losing, like that can be a great signal that maybe you need, like maybe something changed that you haven't realized, and maybe you do need to go deeper into like one specific competitor. But I think it's unlikely that that's going to happen like across the board against all competitors at the exact same time, if nothing else like has changed.
Nice. I like that. So I feel like competitive intel is it's because the question I want to ask you is: are there any companies out there who you think are doing this well? But I feel like with competitive intel, you kind of have to be in the room to know if they're doing it well. The type of conversations they're having, the insights they have. It's you don't really want to be you don't really want people to know what you know. But have you just seen any good examples out there? Any companies doing it well that maybe people could learn from?
So, I mean, for competitive intel specifically, I think you're right, right? Like, I mean, you can probably assume that if a company is leading in its category, then they're doing a good job. I think there's like really great examples for like launches and things like that. But I think again, like for like specifically for competitive intel, um, it's kind of it's kind of hard to tell. I think I can share though that I think more and more companies are now using like non-product things as differentiators. Like we're starting to see way more like community or brand focus
Mm,
differentiators, which I think are really interesting because again, I think it kind of like goes back to the like like the topic that we talked about like three times until now, but only differentiating based on product functionality, even if you have something that is very, very different, it's probably a matter of time until that's gonna become stale, right? Because usually products is easy to copy, is easy to imitate. So it's very hard to keep product as a really sticky differentiation point. And there's definitely been companies who, I mean, just like look at Apollo now, like they're like everyone knows them, but when they started, they went against like ZoomInfo, which were like a giant company at the time, and they kind of, I think a lot of their success has been because of that community first approach, and that was kind of like their main differentiation point, which is really interesting. If you look at Clay, for example, another one, right? Like everyone knows them, everyone talks about them. They've like completely exploded, and they again, like they did that with, I don't know if to call it like community or partnerships, but they had some like really early adopters that used the technology and shared about it. Like they were very like vocal about like look how amazing that tool is, and like this is how you can do that too. And it just became such a huge like attraction point for so many other people. I think like if you look at like video editing tools as well, you will kind of see similar things. um, Interactive demos, for example, like you see more and more of these companies, but the ones that people like talk about more, honestly, I can tell you that their product is better. I have no idea, but there's definitely a couple of companies that that are more that you hear about more, again because they kind of found those people they can tap into that can share about what they're doing in the product and their successes, and that kind of became their like their attraction. And I think like these are all great examples of how you can use market or competitive like knowledge to find those differentiation point and really go all in on them, and be successful because of that.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I think that really underpins your point at the beginning about um, competitive intel is really like a key data point across the whole of the business. Like I do think that we've got to the point in the SaaS industry where products look very similar. And if they don't look similar, they can look similar within a few months. Really, product roadmaps are like a few months within each other. And so I feel like if you're new to an existing market, then I feel like one of your wedges can be things like, okay, well, can I build a better community? Can I build a better distribution channel? Can I build better brand advocacy with influencers? Like, I think that is where um, you can really gain your unique advantage. Whereas previously, I think it has always been, well, we have this feature, or even pricing
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. I think the playing field is just completely different due to the competitive landscape. So yeah, I totally resonate with that. Like, I'm in Clay's creator program. I've seen how they've built it, and it's just it gets to the point. Probably the algorithm is influencing this, but there's not a day that goes by where people aren't talking about Clay. Like it
Right.
just it almost feels like it's too good to be true. But I use the product and it's great, and so I think it is true. But everyone is just constantly singing its praises, and if you can spot that opportunity early on and capitalize on that, then yeah, you're gonna win against anyone. So let's say I'm a startup founder, or I'm like an early hire at a startup, like maybe first PMM or first marketer. Like, what is, and maybe this is an impossible question, but what is like the minimal viable competitive intel program? Like, what should startups be doing at a very minimum? Like, currently, they're not looking at competitors. Like, what should they just be doing as a base standard?
I think if you're, I mean, if you're really starting, like just, like at the very, very, very beginning, um, focus first on on your audience, right? Like, because the startups, like that startup exists for a reason. Talk to the customers, really understand who they are and their pain and like their use case. I think, I think that's like, and that's like a double-edged sword there, because usually I would say like niching down is your best, like your best bet, like just like pick your one main audience and all of that. I think if you're really, really early, you probably have like a larger group of people, and then like over time, maybe you'll start to see like which one of them like is really sticking. Um, but again, I think like don't go crazy. Just like figure out from your current buyers, users, like identify who are like the good ones that you want to retain and that you want to continue, that are willing to pay for what you're giving them. Understand their consideration, like their thought process really well, understand who they're considering, and make sure that you know these options. And again, like these options may be like really indirect competitors in terms of product. I think what makes them relevant to you is the fact that your target audience is considering them. Like that makes them super relevant. So you have to get to know them. And yeah, just like try to figure out like what's their target audience. Do that target audience like actually likes them? Do they find what they're doing useful? Do they have other, maybe other audiences that are like really find it useful and like not who they're trying to talk to? Just like trying to find those holes and like those gaps, and figure out how you can win against each one of them. Like again, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to like buy a super expensive software, but you do have to know your data, to know your customers really, really well. And I would say, especially that if it's a smaller company, if you're just starting out, I think that not having a ton of resources is actually a benefit, because like at a certain level, when you do, then you start to outsource stuff, right? Like you don't do win loss yourself. You have a company that does it for you, or like you have like a consultant that is going to do it for you, or someone who's going to figure out like your ICP maybe. But I think that when you're early on and that you don't have that access and you don't have those resources and you kind of have to figure it out yourself, it just forces you to be in the weeds, which is probably the best thing that you can do to learn really quickly what's working and what's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I feel like in the earlier stages, yeah, you don't want to be outsourcing this like absolute fundamental stuff that is going to essentially give you the building blocks of your company's strategy for the next 6 to 12 months. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
not something you want to delegate out too early, I think. Cool. Okay. So really insightful conversation. It's been fun to geek out about competitive intelligence and positioning. Where can people learn more about you and potentially collaborate with you if they want to?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to probably reach out to me or to find me is probably on LinkedIn. I try to show up there pretty consistently. Um, I mean, I have some of my resources on my website that you can also find on LinkedIn, but I'm more slower to update them to my glorious resources library. But yeah, always just like one DM away.